Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for, man, it's already April the 25th in the year of our Lord 2025. This is hour one of two, and the goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers, using the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, for the United States of America as our guide. After all, it is the supreme law of the land. Rejecting revolution, unless it's a Jesus revolution, then we're in. You want to know why? Because we follow the Prince of Peace. That's why. Welcome to the broadcast that is a freedom-loving fantastic. We're taking America back, one heart, one mind, one faith-filled issue at a time Friday, which means they're good doctors in the house. Dr. Scott Bradley, welcome back, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm hanging around waiting to see what kind of stunts you pull today in terms of, the news that's out there, man. You wonder what you're going to settle on. I mean, there's never been a stir like this. Every day has multiple stories that are probably worthy of our following, at least, and probably our concern.
Never enough time. Always too much news. I think that's an intentional communist propaganda tool to just overwhelm you with too much. And so it's part of our job to sift through and bring the stories to your attention that matter the most. How do you get, cut through the clutter and the confusion and the, subterfuge and the overwhelming, and focus on the things that are most important. That's one of the things we do on Liberty Roundtable Live. That's why we call it news the networks refuse to use. Because we either bring a story to the table they don't, or we bring a twist, a unique focus on a story that they don't have the guts to cover. So that's how we roll on the broadcast today. And there's so much to cover, so little time, but I want to start out with Donald Trump's 100-day deal, because everybody's all about it. First off, it's not even Trump's 100th day yet. The 100th day will be on April the 30th from what I count on my calendar. And so today's the 25th, which means he's 95 days in, Doctor. And USA Today created a big old article called The First 100 Days, and they go through all the top 100 things they think that Donald's done that's significant or good or bad or ugly or whatever you want to call it. And I just thought you and I might not go through all 100 because it's pretty boring, a lot of it. But I thought I'd talk about some of the details. Now, Chuck Baldwin on the other side of the coin. So you got the extremists on one side, which hate Donald. You got everybody else who loves Donald. And, good, honest, right-thinking Americans find themselves in the middle. Trump does a lot of good. Trump does a lot of bad. And how do you embrace the good and reject the bad, but be honest with yourself? And, that's kind of what we try to pave the way here on the radio. We're not Trump never Trumpers or Trump haters or whatever you want to call it. We don't have anti-Trump syndrome or whatever else. But we're not also loving Trump, and everything that he does is perfect. And, he needs a third term because he's God's gift to the presidential world and all this kind of lie. And there's a reality in the middle that I think Americans need to really understand. And there's principles to be held and focused on that relate to all these discussions. And so I thought, Dr. Bradley, we could start out by talking about the 100 things that you think. We'll drop our 100 to maybe 5 or 6 things, really, because I think that's the only ones that are critical. A lot of them are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things that relate to kind of the same discussions. Let me give you a quick example. Tariffs at the border. Or tariffs, I'm sorry. There's a gazillion things related to tariffs, good, bad. Everybody's rioting. Everybody's, unhappy. They think it's incredible. And I'm right in the middle. I support tariffs 100%, but I think tariffs is a congressional responsibility. And I'm lacking the checks and balances here. And so even though I support the tariff idea, I'm not so sure I support tariffs. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not so sure. I know that I don't support tariffs by executive order or by presidential edict. That's the problem here. So am I for tariffs? Yes. Am I for the president singularly doing whatever he wants to with tariffs while Congress sits on the sidelines, completely disenfranchised from the process due to their own negligence and their own dereliction of duty? Absolutely. So tariffs, believe it or not, is one of the critical issues, and I think principles should undergird our study of and discussion of this topic. Doctor?
Well, I agree with what you're saying here. The tariffs, absolutely, it is Article 1, Section 8. That's the job description of the legislature, and there is no delegation of authority possible from things that have been delegated constitutionally to the legislature. So everybody's out of bounds on this thing. And a big second thing is...
I'm not out of bounds on this, though, and neither are you, and this is my whole point. If more of us Americans would stand on the principles, would say Congress, You're going to get removed from office if you don't get this together fast. And Trump, you need to back off and let Congress provide the lead. Let's get some solid guidance here. Let's use the checks and balances. Then we wouldn't have the stock market in such free fall kind of territory. People are just panicking because we've created instability in the marketplace. That's disaster. That's the whole opposite of what government is supposed to be doing.
Well, the tariffs are kind of a subset of weaponization of our economic power, and some of the actions we're taking, and I think the tariffs could fall at least partially in this area, are really truly acts of war. I mean, you look at what the Brits did to the Americans, back in the early 1800s, and their weaponization of their economic power. And we say you can trade with these guys, and here's how you trade with those guys. And finally, the American says, we ain't going to do this no more. And so they went to war over the whole thing. And so these blockades, embargoes, and all these economic sanctions historically have been considered acts of war. And, of course, Trump has never been, shall we say, loath to take acts of war that really, truly, historically would have been looked at. I remember, the invasion of Cambodia in 1970. And we were in Vietnam. We'd been invited in, if you will, by the regime that was there. But Cambodia was next door, and we invaded it. I mean, holy cow, that was a stirring pot thing in, the whole world scenario that we had out there. Everybody's going, oh my goodness, the United States has taken on an aggressive war stance. They're going across, international borders, and they're taking, of course, we'd been bombing Laos and stuff like that for a long time, but that wasn't general news. This idea of invading Cambodia really, really got eyebrows up. And nowadays, just for the heck of it, they send 1,000 Tomahawk missiles in on the Houthis, and they send all of the jets in off the carriers. And it's like, no, wait, stand by one. How different is this from Pearl Harbor? I mean, the Japanese sent in wave after wave after wave of airplanes and bombed the heck out of Pearl Harbor and the surrounding area. And suddenly, a day of infamy. The next day, we declare war and all this kind of stuff. Well, we do that kind of at the drop of a hat, whether we're sending missiles into Syria.
Look at the Ukraine right now. We're involved there. Look at the Israel/Gaza Strip/ whatever thing. Look at the Russia, Ukraine. Look at we're bombing Yemen? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's
right
the
now.
Houthis. Yeah.
Okay, and so you look at this and you go, why are we there? So that's the second one. The first one's tariffs that I have, and again, these are not in any order. They're just kind of the top discussion points, really. One is this issue about tariffs, and as you're right, it equates to acts of war on one hand. On the other hand, Trump's just trying to get something moving in somewhat the right direction, so how much you can blame a modern-day president is hard to say, as one man doing his very best with a very hostile scenario around him. So this isn't an attack on Trump, but it is an effort to discuss it with a principles-based discussion. So the next one's war. Why are we in all these wars? Why are we bombing these people? Why do we have, interests in 130-plus nations militarily speaking? Why are we spending $1 trillion on the war military-industrial complex? Why are we doing all that? And see, if I were to back away from that, I would basically be putting modest tariffs in place. I'd be asking Congress to back my leadership. And then I'd be backing out of a lot of these wars. I mean, if you want to save money in America, the biggest thing you do is you take our military and you drop maybe the $1 trillion we're spending to maybe $500 billion, $500 billion. That's what Trump even proposed doing for starters, but yet no one's taken action. It's just been all rhetoric, and then Congress votes actually increased military spending. And I don't think it's going to get any better. Every dollar we increase in spending is just going to mean the war machine, the weaponization of war just continues. And I'm telling you, until we back away from that, we don't have a solid leg to stand on as a world leader, Doctor.
Well, arguably, the two most lucrative businesses in the world are war and pharma. So pharmacology, the two most lucrative businesses, and both of them have got a stranglehold on the United States. And you look at the control they had during the COVID con thing, and we're hoping Bobby Kennedy can kind of unravel some of that. But let's you bring a thing that I think it's a corollary issue. If you don't want to go down this path, stop me. But here's the deal. Netanyahu was planning on bombing the heck out of, I would have put it a lot stronger than that, Iran beginning in probably the first week in May. there was a big debate in the Trump administration, arguing back and forth. We repositioned a carrier group and all this kind of stuff, ostensibly for the Houthis, but really everybody really should know this is for the green light on the Iran attack. Now, we're told that some of the war hawks were opposed to this. And they let their opinions be known. Sounds like we've got to take a little break.
Hold on just a minute. Congress never authorized any bombing of Iran or any
No, that's where I'm going, Sam. But the whole world conceded
Hold on. Hang tight, ladies and gentlemen. Liberty Roundtable live in seconds. Where the heck's Congress? They seem to be missing in action, huh? This is Liberty Roundtable Live.
As a parent, is receiving a faith-based, character-focused education for your children difficult to find? Do you believe that godly principles should be a central component in your child's education? Imagine a school where faith and integrity are at its center, where heritage and responsibility instill character. For over 40 years, American Heritage School has been educating both hearts and minds, bringing out academic excellence. This is the school where character and embracing the providence of a living God are fundamental, where students' national test scores average near the 90th percentile. With American Heritage School's Advanced Distance Education Program, distance is no longer an issue. With an accredited LDS-oriented curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade, your children can attend from anywhere in the world. American Heritage School will prepare your child for more than a job. It will prepare them for life. To learn more, visit american-heritage.org. That's american-heritage.org.
Do you treasure your liberty? Well, at lovingliberty.net, we most certainly do. And we want to help protect your liberty too. Become part of the family. Everyone knows that the core of any society is the family. Therefore, the government should foster and protect the integrity of its family, we the people. Won't you join us as a Loving Liberty sponsor to help us promote the principles in the 5,000-year leap? Let's restore the miracle that changed the world at lovingliberty.net.
As you are aware, America is divided over every fault line possible. This is intentionally fostered by those who do not love God, family, or country. We believe a peaceful future as a free people absolutely depends on civility. Clarion Call for Civility is looking for funding and volunteers at every level to make our hopes and efforts a reality. Please donate, sign our pledge, and help us in our sacred cause. Please visit callforcivility.com for more details. Callforcivility.com.
Okay, before the interlude we had there, I brought up and stirred the pot about the Iran bombing that's been astir in the Washington, D.C. inner circles. And accordingly to the best reports we have, this was on the table being debated very vigorously within the Trump administration. Netanyahu planned something first part of May. I don't know exactly the date. And it was an all-out bomb the heck out of using 3,000-pound bombs on Iran. First step was going to be we're going to take out their early warning systems, their radar systems, their SAM missiles and all that kind of stuff. And then once those things were taken care of and the jets on the ground and in the air and everything like that, they were going to start delivering the 3,000-pound bombs. And this was going to be probably a weeks long, not just a hit and run kind of thing, a weeks long endeavor. And Netanyahu wanted the wink and the nod from Trump, and Trump went so far as to basically position some pretty hefty hardware out there overseeing the whole project. And again, it's like, oh, we're going to bomb the heck out of the Houthis. So we better have all these jets and everything out here. We're going to have other jets that will be repositioned into other locations, blah, blah, blah. Two known as Warhawks, Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard, were opposed to it. And I think they were two that had their heads where the sun shined. Because the fact of the matter is that a war with Iran is going to be way different. And in fact, Isaiah warns against war with Iran. He calls them the Medes and the Persians. You can go read that up. But the fact of the matter is, it's a different war than it ever was with any of the other nonsense we've been involved in, as bad as somebody may say any of these things are. But here's my concern. Without Trump's approval, Netanyahu ostensibly and supposedly backed off. So if Trump can green light something or red light something, what is the world going to assume if that attack ever does get carried out? It will be assumed that the Americans are behind it. The Americans are the big brother. They're going to stand there. They're going to let it happen. I can't think of a war Israel's been in, the modern state of Israel, has been in that was not a preemptive war that they started. And it's, I mean, you go back to 1947, December, and then you go into the 48 war and everything. All of this stuff, and going forward, they punch first and then they look for some help. And now the big problem is if you're punching Iran and you're expecting the United States to pull the full military force of the United States in back of this thing, this is a war that, you know, Sam talks about, oh, where's the Congress? I mean, these guys, they haven't declared war. Well, I got news for you. Iran will start punching back. And here's the deal, though. I think Israel is going to find out that Iran's
Hold on,
already
before you go on to
system.
Israel, once Iran starts punching back, here's what will happen. Congress will basically fund the president till the cows come home, but they
Right.
won't do anything in terms of their responsibilities, in terms of determining, laying out a plan to go to war and to solve a problem that's threatening America, justify it constitutionally, put it before Congress so that, hey, we got a broad-based understanding of what we're going to accomplish and how to get out and everything else. They'll be derelict in that, but what they'll say is we don't dare not fund it because, man, we can't be the guys that leave our own people in harm's way. And they'll pretend they're over a barrel and just lie to the American people and be derelict in their duty and not do their job and leave it in the president's hands. And if it's a success, they'll all take credit. And if it's a failure, they'll blame it on the presidency. And so we, the people, need to demand these checks and balances and just tell our congressmen and senators, hey, if you don't call a halt to the con game here and stop the president and really debate this and decide if we're going to war or not, if we're not going to war, what constitutionally short of war might justify, if there are any legitimate needs here at all, what that would be. And, hey, we need to remove all 435 House members if they don't get that done right now.
Well, here's the deal. They'll say we got to support the troops. So who started this?
Best way to
whole
support
nonsense?
the troops is leave them home with their families.
Keep them out of harm's way. And
Yes, sir.
let's just say an aircraft carrier gets sunk. I mean, that's a pretty big community. We're going to lose 5,000 people right off the bat. Hopefully, some will be able to swim to some debris that's floating around. The Iranians have. When I was in, the Iranians were our ally. They were. We were training them, to be honest with you, and we brought them out of the dark ages. But honestly and truthfully, they have gone way in advance in many ways beyond what I think our capabilities are right now. They have these hypersonic missiles, for example.
Yeah, where'd they get all that?
Well, you know what? They may have developed a lot of them, or they may have bought a lot of them. I mean, there's other people out there messing around with these things, and I think we have allowed
How
ourselves
many weapons
to.
would be on the planet if Russia and China and the United States weren't the weapons generators?
Well, that'd be a few AK-47s and some sticks and rocks. But
Okay,
but that's the thing is, if we lose an aircraft
I'm just saying
carrier,
it's our most favored nation trading partner in China, our supposed enemy now that used to be a friend, Russia, or the United States, creating all these arms, and then we act like, oh man, they're armed to the teeth, we got to stop these people. Well, we're the ones that created them with our, military-industrial complex in the first place. We're the greatest arms dealer the world's ever known, right?
well, we create the best enemy money can buy. I mean, Russia would have gone under in the 1930s with the communist
We
Russians.
should have let it happen.
And we didn't, though. FDR recognized them and gave them trade status and turn around. Everybody in the whole world does
Well,
it.
now they say Donald Trump's made more changes than any other president. He's on par with FDR.
Well, and that's the thing is FDR gave the Russians a lifeline and basically kept them viable. And, of course, then through our program in World War II, we did the same thing. Now, we could diverge on that for a long time, but because if the Russians had not taken the thrashing they had and the losses they had to the Nazis, I think Europe would have been in real big trouble. I mean, I think that the Russians truly made the sacrifice for World War II, and we helped supply some of their munitions stuff. But the fact is, if they lost 20 million people, which is arguably a good number,
and all of that enough, happened, but yes.
Anyway, no. But if we lose an aircraft carrier, suddenly it's going to be our war. It's going to be the Odrang Valley all over again.
Well, and that's why I say the biggest thing we've got to do is make sure we don't let them deceive the president into becoming a wartime president, and that's where I'm afraid we're headed if we're not very careful. But so war is one of the big critical issues on the table. Congress needs to be involved. We need tariffs. We need to basically have the Congress involved and deal with that issue. The other issue is the border. And you know what? I think Trump's done in some ways some good things on the border. He's really slowed down the invasion, which I think is great. But if you compare data from 2024 to 2025, so Joe Biden to Donald Trump, Joe hasn't even deported more people than Barack did. So maybe he's rounding up the right, thug gang members or the right bad guys, and maybe he's, more focused on getting rid of the, where they might deport one person last year that's not consequential, but this year we deport a gang member, for instance, or something like that. Maybe it's more consequential. That's debatable. But Donald Trump hasn't really even deported more people than Barack or any of the other presidents have to date. So, how well are we doing on the border? I mean, I think we're doing better than we were, but I don't think we're doing near what we had hoped to do at all, Doctor.
Well, they've staunched the flow of blood, I think, across the border right now.
Which is good.
They've activated the Roosevelt Reservation, with that 60-foot wide, I guess it can be called a buffer zone, DMZ, whatever you want to call it, that goes across, well, not all the way across, but pretty much California, Arizona, and New Mexico, stops at the Texas border. But 60 feet wide, I mean, that's only the length of 2 telephone poles out in front of your house. It's a narrow thing that they're basically causing a demilitarized zone to be, and they're using it to staunch the flow of blood. But you're absolutely right in regards to the numbers that need to be removed from the nation. If you've got 30 million illegals, and I think you can make the argument that really is close to the number. I mean, for 25 years they've been saying 12 million, and they can't come in 2 million a week. And I'm overstating that, I know. You can't come in 2 million a week for an extended period of time and not have that number get really big really fast. And they're not deporting them as fast as they could or should. And if you look at it, let's say we've had 100,000 that have been deported. And I don't think we're anywhere close to that. If you've had 100,000 deported in the first 100 days, that's basically 1,000 a day. And again, that number's way inflated. Okay, but if we're deporting 1,000 a day and Trump has 4 times 365, we're not even going to hit 1.5 million of those 30 million that need to be removed. I mean, and if you look at the reproduction rates, how many decades is it going to? Well, they're never going to make it because they're going to be multiplying faster than we can remove them. I mean, this is a really big challenge, and most people aren't even thinking about that. They're thinking, we got a couple of, MS-13 guys taken out. Woo-woo. But honestly, I don't see anybody taking kind of any kind of concern in their daily lives. I mean, our community is largely, I guess you'd call it a sanctuary community. And there's nobody that seems to have the bit of concern about
Yeah, I love how we use sanctuary to determine criminal community.
Right. Exactly.
Because when you go along with illegal aliens, it's not sanctuary. That's a bad term. Sanctuary kind of makes you believe we're the good guys and we're providing protection. That's not true. What you're really doing is partner with criminals. So you got your government, sanctuary cities, in bed defying the general government at the expense of partnering with literal gang members and criminals and drug cartels. And, well, now they're called terrorists, right? So now you got your governments in the United States partnering with terrorists and literally calling it, what, protection? Sanctuary? It's a lie. All right, when we get back, I want to talk about executive orders because that's one of the biggest problems on the table. We'll talk about it in seconds with Dr. Scott Bradley on Liberty Roundtable Live.
Exposing corruption, informing citizens, pursuing liberty. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. President Trump has signed an executive order aimed at speeding up deep-sea mining of minerals crucial to the production of batteries, computer chips, and some weapon systems. Environmentalists are dismayed, but the president says the United States must wean itself from its dependence on communist China.
The White House has promised that the order will create 100,000 jobs and hundreds of billions of dollars in economic growth. But China was clearly on the mind as Mr. Trump signed the papers. It is estimated that the U.S. seafloor has 1 billion metric tons of potato-sized nodules containing nickel, manganese, and cobalt. They are critical in making electric car batteries and computer chips, and the world relies on China for them.
The BBC's Jake Kwan. Courts continue trying to derail the Trump agenda. An Obama-appointed judge is limiting the withholding of funds from public schools with DEI initiatives, while another judge blocks an executive order requiring people to prove citizenship when they sign up to vote. No breakthrough yet in the tariff standoff between Washington and Beijing. The two sides can't even agree on whether they've been holding talks. President Trump says some negotiations have taken place, while China insists there have been no talks. 19-year-old man in custody in connection with a wildfire raging in New Jersey's Pine Barrens. The suspect said to have lit a pile of wooden pallets on fire and then leaving them to burn. The feds say they will seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione, charged in the murder of the United Healthcare CEO. Mangione due in court today to enter a plea. He has previously pled not guilty to state charges in the case. Watching Wall Street this morning, stocks have been mixed, and right now they're lower. The Dow down 125 points, the Nasdaq is off 36, the S&P down 7 points. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Financial Group is not a law firm.
They told us nothing but lies.
These timeshare thieves out there are terrible.
They bullied us.
Our timeshare is all a scam.
They stole from us. They were thieves.
I was completely taken advantage of.
Hello, I'm Chuck McDowell, founder and CEO of Wesley Financial Group, and I know the tough spot you're in. Are you asking yourself, why did I buy that timeshare? I'll tell you why, because that presentation wasn't a normal sales pitch. It was a show to convince you that timeshare is a great investment. They told you it was available today and today only. They said you're foolish if you don't buy, and unfortunately, you believed them. We get over 3,000 complaints a week from folks just like you that were misled into buying a timeshare. Give us a call. I guarantee if we take you as a client, we will cancel your timeshare or you'll pay nothing.
Call now for your free information kit. 800-989-1771. 800-989-1771. 800-989-1771.
Bypass the mainstream narrative with Liberty News Radio at libertynewsradio.com. Engage with charismatic hosts live or on demand. We cover the crucial news focused on God, family, and country. News that other networks simply refuse to use. Think of LNR's hard-hitting news and podcasts at your fingertips, anytime, anywhere. Join us at libertynewsradio.com. Empower your day with the truth, because the truth will set you free. libertynewsradio.com.
Introducing Managed IT Services from NPI. We offer top-notch data backup and recovery, email spam protection, and network security tailored to your needs and budget. With 20-plus years of experience in the medical field, our HIPAA-certified consultants know what it takes to protect sensitive information. Don't settle for less. Give us a call at 801-706-6980 and experience the difference with Managed IT Services. Remember, your IT support should be fast, efficient, and reliable.
Scott Bradley here. Most Americans are painfully aware that the nation is on the wrong track and in dire straits. Unfortunately, most political pundits only nibble around the edges when they claim to address the issues. Even worse, many of the so-called solutions are simply rewarmed servings of what got us into the mess we currently face. And the politicians think we're so gullible and naive that we'll buy their lies that they have reformed, and now understand where they led us astray. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that they simply wish to continue to hold power. The solution to America's challenges is found in returning to the timeless principles found in the United States Constitution. My book and lecture series will reawaken in Americans an understanding and love of the principles which made this nation the freest, most prosperous, happiest, and most respected nation on earth. Visit topreservethenation.com and order my book and lectures to begin the restoration of this great nation.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right, the biggest problem that I'm seeing, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump, whether you're a never Trumper or an always Trumper, set that aside because the extremes are not helpful. But let's look at things from a principle-based discussion. I appreciate a lot of what Donald Trump's brought up and taken on and worked on and all that kind of stuff. I think he truly has a desire to make America better. I get all that. My problem, though, Doctor, is this idea. Dr. Scott Bradley with me, freedomsrisingsun.com. My problem, Doctor, is this executive order reality. We just cannot executive order everything. That was never the intent of the founders. Executive orders were meant for internal use only to guide the executive branch of government. I get that, but we've gone way too far. We've simply said, hey, if the Congress won't go along, or if I can't work through the checks and balances, I'm just going to basically do whatever I want to. The problem is it smacks of tyranny. The problem is it smacks of like a monarch or a king. Or what? Okay, and the liberals, the conservatives, the debate this till the cows come home. But at some point, you just simply say, look, how does the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, document? So there's a contract with the people. How does it document government's supposed to run? An executive order all day long is not the answer. And so Trump's been, just issuing executive order after executive order. I appreciate the desires, but for example, getting rid of the education department. Great example. You don't just executive order that thing out of the matrix of America. The reality is Congress has got to simply change the law. They haven't even come close. They haven't voted on it as far as I could tell. They haven't done anything of any value at all. So we're stuck. And the problem is we're going about it in ways that when it's Trump, everybody wants to say, oh, that's great because he's a good guy. What happens when it's the Bidens of the world? What happens when this is going to backfire spectacularly, and I think a horrible precedent has been set. That's not a goal to attack Trump. It's a goal to focus on principle and say, look, when you violate principles, it will not go well, Doctor.
Well, that's the problem. This isn't the first time we've had this out-of-control muckety-muck mess. No time has America ever elected a monarch, but yet and still we act like he is, and that's the whole issue, is that they divided and subdivided and contained and controlled power so it couldn't get out of control. And, a lot of things that Trump's doing was kind of unwinding the executive orders that were sent out previously unconstitutionally. But let's look at the Constitution. Let's just see what the exact wording is. Go to Article 2, Section 2, halfway through Clause 1. For those of you that got your fingers doing the walking in your Constitution, the President may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. We went silent. Why? Because that's the sum and substance of this executive order, Bravo Sierra. There is no capability of creating law. In fact, Article 1, Section 1 says all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. That is the problem, is that so much of what is being created is being, they call it, maybe regulations or they, basically call it guidelines, whatever it is. But if it's enforced as though it were law upon Americans, like, for example, if the BATFE puts out a new regulation or the IRS does or whatever, suddenly that's enforced as though it were law upon Americans. And Americans didn't agree to be governed by that kind of law. They said, okay, we will be governed by law created within these parameters, these limits and bounds by these people. And that's it. They did not agree to any of that other stuff. So what Trump is doing in some instances is unwinding some of the really bad things that were done unconstitutionally before by executive order. And I'll just give an example of what could be.
Let me even explain the problem, though. Even if you unwind things that are bad that were done by the other guy, and you unwind them that same way, then all you're doing is leaving it open for the next guy to come along and unwind your deal or do whatever he wants.
Sure.
Okay. The problem is we've got to have Congress codify this stuff. And what they say now is we're going to pass the big, beautiful spending bill. Once that's done, then we're going to have Congress spend nothing but time to codify. we're going about it backwards. Let's just fund the legitimate form of the proper role of government, and let's codify this stuff yesterday. Congress has literally been there for like 115 days now or something like that. And I don't really see a whole lot they've accomplished. They've passed a big bunch of spending. Other than that, they've been just completely derelict in their duty. And so I appreciate the idea of saying we're going to come and codify this stuff later. But they're running out of time, Doctor. We're about to start the next election cycle, my friend.
Right. But yeah, but the problem is that they really get direction. We want a big, beautiful bill. You mentioned that a moment ago. That isn't the way it's supposed to be. And
I don't want a big, beautiful bill.
And let's say they put together a big, beautiful bill that's only 100 pages long. Oh, wow, we can deal with that. But it says basically that we're going to set up all the rules and regulations on this thing at some future date through regulatory bodies or some silly nonsense. The problem is that there is no containment. That big, beautiful bill that he got a $4 trillion addition to the budget ceiling. It got $6 billion additionally for the military. I mean, these kinds of things, and then the rest of it's just eyewash saying we're going to continue funding as we were through September 30th.
Or they say we're going to decrease funding, but it's pushed so far out to a 10-year term, which is literally 5 congressional elections and 10 congressional cycles away, right? That's worthless.
So we, and you say, well, we just saved $100 billion. Let's just pick a number. And they're that ludicrous, literally. And you come to read the fine print, oh, well, that's over 10 years. There ain't no way in the world that is going to hold water over 10 years. I've never in all my born days observed, and I've been observing for many decades, any one of those that have come to fruit. It's because they are projections based on by guess and by golly. It's kind of like the hockey stick stuff that you see on the global warming. Somebody put together a computer program, and it's only as good as whoever programmed it with the parameters they did. And they make this projection over so long, years, decades, whatever it is. And as you point out, we got plenty of elections. No Congress can bind a future Congress. Now, what does that mean? It means you can pass a law that says it's illegal to jaywalk this year, and next Congress passes one that says it's legal to jaywalk. You can't stop Congress from making different laws, and that's exactly what happens with these things. Congress should be acting now, saying, okay, we got some pretty good intel here that says waste and corruption is going on in these areas. We're going to cut back these areas. We're going to legislatively fix this. Now, by the way, Article 1, Section 7 tells you how you do that. And Article 1, Section 9 tells you they can't spend money unless it's legislatively authorized. So Congress has the purse strings. Congress can do the thing. Congress is the key, as the John Birch Society said for many decades and probably still does. But the fact of the matter is that the president is not a monarch. And that's what they were trying to prevent. If you read Article 2 of the Constitution, the president's really kind of got a pretty tucked-in group of powers. He's checked and balanced, and he's kind of the executive that kind of stands up and gives, State of the Union addresses or reports. But he doesn't call out law. Congress has to pass that. He doesn't call out budgetary. He might recommend. Congress has to pass that. Congress really does have all of the strings, all of the power. And right now, people have pretty well forgotten that. And by the way, I had a pointed discussion some years ago when I ran for the Senate about war powers with the president. And this individual I was speaking to said, oh, yeah, I'm all for the Constitution. We love the Constitution. Boy, we got to have it. It's God-inspired and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, so what do you think about the Iraq war? Oh, the president had to do that. He just had, the Congress was never going to respond. I got news for you, kids. We wouldn't have had the Iraq war had Congress been on their job. Because everything they said that brought about, the weapons of mass destruction, the enriched uranium, kind of like what's going on with Iran right now. And everybody's, all of the talking heads are up there beating the drum, the war drums and everything like that. Not one. Saddam Hussein could not get a Piper Cub off the ground without us knowing about that. He was no threat to us. He had no weapons of mass destruction, no weaponized anthrax, no weaponized smallpox, no uranium enrichment. There was none of these things that had happened. But the president unilaterally just basically said, we're going to war with this guy. It never would have happened. But Congress didn't have the backbone to do what was the right thing.
Well, and that's the point. We, the people, need to put pressure on Congress. We can't sit by and idly watch. That's not the way the constitutional republic called the United States of America was supposed to operate. We have a republic if we can keep it. There's a role for we, the people, to play, and it's to demand that checks and balances are obeyed. That's number one responsibility for we, the people. Hang tight. More in seconds on your radio.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at CSPOA.org. That's CSPOA.org.
Why don't we say to the government writ large that they have to spend a little bit less? Anybody ever had less money this year than you had last? Anybody ever having a 1% pay cut? You deal with it. That's what government needs, a 1% pay cut. If you take a 1% pay cut across the board, you have more than enough money to actually pay for the disaster relief. But nobody's going to do that because they're fiscally irresponsible. Who are they? Republicans. Who are they? Democrats. Who are they? Virtually the whole body is careless and reckless with your money. So the money will not be offset by cuts anywhere. The money will be added to the debt, and there will be a day of reckoning. What's the day of reckoning? The day of reckoning may well be the collapse of the stock market. The day of reckoning may be the collapse of the dollar. When it comes, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you it has happened repeatedly in history when countries ruin their currency.
In addition to the executive order stuff that's going on, I reject it. Congress needs to step up to the plate, and we, the people, need to demand Congress do so. That's our role. Dr. Bradley with me, freedomsrisingsun.com. If you want an incredible collegiate series, Think to Preserve the Nation, and go to freedomsrisingsun.com. It's available for you, not to mention the weekly webinars available at freedomsrisingsun.com. But I bring this all up because the next thing that concerns me about the Trump administration and where we are and where we're sitting at close to 100 days is this hawkish idea. You know, we got to take over Canada, make it the 51st state. We got to take over Greenland. We got to, be involved in all this stuff. Why don't we think domestic for a minute, Dr. Bradley, and just say, look, we got to get our own house in order before we start reaching out to anybody else. If the Canadians were asking to become the 51st state, it's worth discussion. If the, people in Greenland are like, hey, would like to partner with the United States and or become part of the United States, those are discussions to have. I think we should have never gave the Panama Canal away. So Trump rightly kind of pointing out that that was a disaster and saying we got to do something about it. I mean, there's some legitimacy to appropriate protecting of America and putting America in a great position around the world. But we're going way too far when we do all this. Why are we focusing on, we can't even get rid of the education department, and we're literally saying we're going to take over Greenland or something. We've got this big contingent headed to Russia right now. As far as I understand, a big Russia important leader was just basically assassinated. I don't understand why this external focus so much. There's nothing there that we can do in the short term. And I think we need to get our spending under control. We need to get America's domestic reality squared away. For example, what government office, I know we've laid off a lot of people and done some good, and I don't down that, but what single government agency? I mean, there's thousands of unconstitutional government agencies. Have we got rid of a single one, Doctor, 100 days in?
No, there's individuals being plucked out of their comfort zone. But, you mentioned this stuff with, let's just take Greenland, for example. There's a lot of truisms about presidents, different things you can say, oh, yeah, that's pretty typical of presidents doing this and that and the other at this particular point during the administration. One of the truisms is that during their second term, presidents have a tendency to dink around with international stuff. They kind of look over the horizon and they say, oh, how can I leave my fingerprints on this thing or that thing? And so during the second term, very often presidents get involved in international stuff. Very often it's war and foreign affairs kind of things that they mess up thoroughly. And so Trump's in his second administration, and he's looking internationally, and you speak it absolutely truth, the fact that we got plenty of problems here at home. And really they say, how can we have a strategic, metals necessary for running our economy or for our military, and Greenland has a gob of those things, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a lot of ways that we can go about things, harvesting things that are currently within our purview. They're in our bailiwick. They're in our hands right this very minute, harvesting things out of the sea within our, coastal waters, and being able to find those precious metals. The seawater contains gobs of things. Everything from gold to, cobalt. It's if we just kind of said, okay, the science is available to do this kind of stuff. Why do we have to go take over another nation? Let's just take this one, Sam. I'm going to throw it out here. They're still blowing on the embers of some kind of mineral agreement with Ukraine, which really is going to put us as a tripwire in Ukraine. If we go there, they say, we're not going to let them in NATO, but we got tens of thousands of American citizens out there digging this stuff out of the ground. And if Russia and Ukraine start to shoot at each other again, Americans are going to get caught in the crossfire. Suddenly, we got skin in the game now, and so we're back in the war. So it's kind of like, okay, you understand that there's more than one way to skin a cat. That's probably not a good euphemism right now. But at any rate, right now, they're looking at a way to basically give Ukraine NATO status, which would put us in a war if they got crosswise with somebody, and yet they're not going to call it NATO. And I'm confident that Putin is going to say, no. Do you think I'm that stupid to think that you guys have overcome my concerns about the NATO alliance and keeping Ukraine out of there by telling me you're going to put tens of thousands of Americans on the ground with a big economic agreement that's going to be large financial exchanges that will allow Ukraine to rearm itself to fight me? All of these dominoes start falling over very quickly. And one thing Putin's not is stupid. There's a lot of things that you may disagree with him on and probably should, but here's the deal. He's a very shrewd, knowledgeable individual. In fact, I suspect he's probably a better Orthodox Russian, believer in religion than Biden ever was a Catholic, for example. I think he has better grasp on religion, a better grasp on his responsibility as a leader of a nation, and he's gonna watch out for those kind of things. And love him or hate him, he's doing what he's in office to do. And he's maybe overstepping the bounds somewhat there too, and I don't want to downplay that. But the fact of the matter is, he's not going to say, oh yeah, you guys just cut a deal over here and all the economic power you're going to give to Ukraine and all the weapons they're going to be able to buy. You're set up a defense agreement with them too that allows them to buy whatever they want to buy and rehash whatever they're trying to restore. He's not going to go with that. And I can see right now that's why the ending of the Ukraine war just hasn't happened. Trump was going to end it the first day. No, nobody's willing to recognize the complexities of what's involved there and recognize that there's more than lines in the sand. These are etched in titanium. Let's talk about Trump
ending this in the first day, though, whether he gets that done or not. I don't even understand where Trump thinks he has authority to end or start or be involved in it at all. What is his role, say, between Russia and the Ukraine? What is his role in terms of Iraq, or what is his role in terms of Israel or the Gaza Strip or whatever? See, I don't think the president has a role there, Doctor.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And like I say, presidents in their second administration generally get dinking around with foreign affairs. Here's the deal.
That's because they're lame ducks and they're trying to make a name for themselves, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, they want to put their fingerprints on everything. Think about Chamberlain.
Isn't President Trump a lame duck right now?
Well, he is. He's going to be
No, I know they're pushing for a third term for him, and that's another disaster. Why are we spending time on a third term for a man who's literally 80 years old?
Well, he's, I think, 78.
I know, but by the time it's
he'll
his
be
next
82
term,
by the time
he'll
he
be more
started
than 80 years old, right?
Yeah, he'll be 82.
So I picked the
if he
middle
started.
between what he is now and what he'd be then, and just said, okay, he's 80 years old. But yeah, you're right. But I'm just saying, what's the advantage of even discussing that? All that does is send to our international enemies, oh, the United States can't even decide what their laws are.
We really have had enough of doddering idiots in the White House. I mean, we got a stomach full of that during the Biden years. And if Trump's going to be 82, if he started a third term, which he will not, it's patently impossible. Stop talking about it, people. And so the thing is, though, that if somebody did pull off a stunt like that, and he was starting at 82 years old, maybe he'll be great until he's 90. I don't know. But mental
But whether
acuity,
he is or not,
cognitive...
giving presidents a third term is a disastrous precedent. What happens when it's the Joe Bidens of the world and the guy can't even talk and they're like, we're going to prop him up by the jukebox for his third term? I mean, this is insane. It doesn't make any sense. And we're wasting tons of time on it while we basically get closer and closer to the next election cycle. Doesn't make any sense.
It does not make any sense at all. But you're right. The United States didn't have a dog in the fight until we put ourselves in there in this Ukraine thing. And Trump says he's going to end it in one day. He didn't. The complexities, it's really, in my opinion, a very simple thing and could be done in a day. But if you're going to continue to feed the idea that somehow we're going to continue to arm Ukraine, we're going to stand by them with weaponry, we're going to allow financial transactions. Again, war is one of the two most lucrative businesses, pharmacy and war. And we got plenty of big bucks, international kind of interests in making sure our war machine stays well oiled. And there's people that are pushing for that, whether we're putting our stuff, 2,000-pound bombs onto Gaza because we're helping the modern state of Israel, or whether we're sending 155 millimeter artillery rounds to Ukraine. We're in the business of war, and we need to get out of that business.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about done with hour one, but there's 100 things in USA Today, 100 items, where they're talking about Trump's first 100 days, some good, some bad, some this, some that. And what I'm trying to do is kind of take a broad coverage of those things, from executive orders to the border, to financing and funding, to Congress, to the president, to authority, to checks and balances, to, and all this kind of stuff, to international affairs versus domestic realities. For example, I don't see a whole lot of effort being focused on saying, hey, let's get the general government out of things the general government has no authority to be involved in. In fact, we're doing just the opposite. We seem to have more laws on the books at the general level. For example, almost every crime now is a federal crime. Whereas the truth is, there's only a list of, I can't remember the number exactly. You can count them on one hand, though, the things that are really international or federal crime kind of things. For example, counterfeiting is one of them. Okay, so you've got to just really dig into this. When are we going to do that? Now, Trump says he's getting rid of 10 regulations or 5 regulations for every new regulation he puts in place. I think that's a great start. It's a great start. But is it enough? Is it fast enough? What changes can we make immediately? Well, I'll tell you this. I think the biggest mistake is how much has been focused on God in the last 100 days and the author of our liberty. We'll talk about that. I'm Sam Bushman, hour one in the can. God save our republic.